6, hit it!
Hey, and welcome to Segalicious, the series with a stupid name where we explore Sega games, both old and new. This is the very first episode, and as such, I wanted to start with a game that everybody loves. First released in November 1998, The House of the Dead 2 is considered to be one of the best, if not the best, like-on shooter of all time, and I'm inclined to agree with this statement. While my personal favorite House of the Dead game is 2009's Overkill, if I take a step back from my biases and objectively look at each game in the series, 2 is definitely the best one. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So for now, get ready to blast through the undead as we traverse through the horrors of The House of the Dead 2. Taking place in Venice, AMS agents James Taylor and Gary Stewart are assigned to uncover the truth behind this mysterious outbreak that's taken place, and their mission involves lots and lots and lots of shooting. As this is an arcade game, the story doesn't really matter that much, and while characters like Goldman, the series' antagonist, are very entertaining and memorable, it's not done in a way that the developers intended. Okay, let's not ignore the elephant in the room here. I know it, you know it, The House of the Dead 2 has some of the worst voice acting ever committed to the medium, and while it sucks hard on an objective level, this just makes it that much more funnier.
Amy? What happened, Amy?
I honestly don't think this game would be as entertaining if not for the jank voice acting, so it forever holds a special place in the part of my brain that causes uncontrollable laughter.
The Coliseum might be a trap, but let's go on.
Even though there isn't much in the way of a story for us to analyze or discuss, I realized during my recent playthroughs of the game that the environments are quite detailed. From the narrow cityscape to the Coliseum to the sewers, all the areas in this game have their own story to tell, and they look awesomely disgusting. The game's visuals and aesthetic, while dated by today's standards, still give off a very grungy, dangerous feel, and this used to scare the crap out of me as a kid. The creatures themselves also look grotesque and frightening, with the game's gore system being ramped up from the original. The first House of the Dead game gave players the ability to blow off body parts, but this wasn't just for show. If you took off an enemy's arm, for example, they could no longer use it to swipe at you, so the game's violence did have a strategy behind it. This returns in full force for The House of the Dead 2, but in even more detail. You're now able to rearrange the faces of mutants and expose their eyeballs if you shoot at their skull, and being able to see exposed rib cages and hearts still freaks me out a little bit. Speaking of creatures, did you know that they actually have names? David, Johnny, Max, and Bob are some of the creature names in the game, and these scary looking mutants having the most normal names ever will always be funny to me. The monsters themselves also have very distinct designs and animations, and it helps to keep the gameplay loop enjoyable. Even though all you have to do in this game is shoot and reload, it never gets repetitive because of all the different enemy types. Hell, some of them even have weapons, and that's not including the insane boss designs, but we'll cover these guys later. Going back to the regular enemies now, they each have their own attack patterns and a way of being defeated, so the more you play and familiarize yourself with how they move and how they function, the faster you'll be able to dispatch them. Another aspect of the game that only serves to enrich the experience is the awesome sound design. From bullets being shot at the speed of light to the cries of monsters as they're gunned down, all the audio in this game is exceptionally done, and when you wear headphones and turn the game's volume up, it can give you a massive adrenaline rush. The music itself is also fantastic too. Composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi and Hiroyoshi Tomita, the game's soundtrack is equally gothic and catchy. It instantly catches your attention and refuses to let go, much like the zombies you come across throughout the game. The developers also knew exactly where to place each track throughout the game. The opening level's underlying bass, high-pitched squeals, and spooky lead, the second level's action-packed guitar lead and catchy melody, and the third level's synths and groovy instrumentation all set the tone perfectly. They all have a similar feel, but they don't sound too alike, helping them to stand apart while still coming together cohesively. Now, let's get into the real meat and potatoes, the gameplay. For starters, you aim at the screen with a light gun and you pull the trigger to fire, and you wave the gun away from the screen to reload. If that sounds simple, that's because it is, but there's still a real ebb and flow to it all. What you might not realize if you don't have a lot of experience with like-on shooters is that shooting isn't the main gameplay mechanic, rather reloading is. Even though it doesn't take a whole lot of time for you to move your arm away from the screen to reload, this brief moment of vulnerability is all it takes for an enemy to hurt you, so you can't spam fire, lest you run out of ammo at a bad time. Enemies can also pop out of nowhere and appear at really unexpected angles, so there's a degree of verticality to the game's level design, and it means that you always have to watch out. The game may start off simple, but it quickly introduces different enemy types, civilians, and branching pathways, so you never get a moment of relief during a level. I mentioned the enemies before, so let's cover the next 2 points. Much like the game's gore system, civilians aren't just window dressing, as they can have tangible impacts on your gameplay experience. If you fail to save one, you may miss out on a hidden pathway or a health item, and if you do save one, you'll be rewarded with some more fantastic voice acting.
Thank you. Please take this.
Trying to save every civilian is part of the game's challenge, and the game will show you how many you manage to save after you finish a level. Save enough of them, and you'll be given an extra life, which is a godsend for arcade games. Moving on to branching pathways now, the best example involves this key. If you shoot the key, you'll move forward throughout the gate and clear out that area, but if you ignore the key, you'll go left instead. These areas can be drastically different, and although you always end up at a boss fight, the different paths you can take to get there adds a nice sense of replay value. It's about the journey, not the destination after all. Speaking of boss fights, these are agreed upon to be the best in the series. They each have their own strategies and little tricks you can apply to defeat them faster. For example, instead of trying to shoot Zeal as he's erratically flying around the screen, you should first unload into Qual to score some more damage over time. Or how about the tower? You have to shoot the mouth that the game locks onto, but if you shoot any of the mouths that are open at any point, you'll score a full attack's worth of damage. The game shows you boss weak points before you begin one of these encounters, but it leaves these little tricks and tips hidden, challenging you to figure them out for yourself. Fighting one of these bosses can be a really stressful experience, especially if you're new to the game and are down to your last dollar. Depending on how you play, there are also multiple endings. The bad ending involves Goldman becoming zombified, the normal ending involves the supporting cast thanking you for saving them, and the good ending involves Rogan, the protagonist of the first game, telling you to keep on fighting the good fight and to never give up. This adds even more replay value, and it's gone on to become an iconic part of the series. If you haven't already, I urge you to play this game. It's easily accessible on PC and the Wii, so if you have at least one of these lying around, there's no excuse. Whether you played it at the arcade, the movie theater, or on one of the various home ports, there are many ways to authentically experience this awesome game, and it needs to be played to be believed. And that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to leave a suggestion for a future game you'd like to see covered. My eventual goal is to cover a bunch of different Sega games from different genres, and I felt like this was a good one to start with. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you in the next episode of Segalicious.